All right, we're at the top of the hour, and this is the webinar dealing with PCM, its results. We are going to be talking about a number of things here today, but we're doing a different style format. We have a couple people here. Greg Goodwin, who will be talking about PCM. He'll do his introduction here shortly. Then I will speak and talk about some of the PCM data, and then Lou will also give us an overview of what it's like to be a field staff and what he is doing out there. By the way, I'm Gary Schnitkey. I am a professor in agricultural economics here at the University of Illinois, and I do a lot of work with PCM. So let's get going here, and Greg, you can start and give us an overview of PCM.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gary. And yes, I am Greg Goodwin with the Illinois Corn Growers Association and the director of the Precision Conservation Management Program, or PCM program, as we often say. And today I'm just going to give you kind of a brief overview of what we do at PCM and sort of how we do it. And then, you will hear more perspectives from Gary on all the different ways we use the data that is collected through the program from our farmer cooperators, and then from Lou on farmer perspectives and what he learns from farmers as we work with them on conservation and understanding economics of that. But to back up a little bit and just kind of give a bit of an overview of the program. So we are a by the farmers, for the farmers conservation program, serving farmers by helping them understand the economics and sustainability related to in-field management decisions. Sort of how we do that is we collect farmer data on a pass-by-pass basis at the field level, and then pair that with sort of the average economic cost of those management passes, and then use that in a benchmarking fashion to provide farmers with an annual report that sort of breaks that down for them and helps them understand how their approach compares economically and sustainability-wise to other farmers in the program in an anonymized, aggregated fashion. So farmers that participate, share their data, only ever see their own data presented back to them. Everything else is presented in aggregate. We take that data security piece extremely seriously. We do not sell farmer data. We do not provide that in any individual format to any of our partners. We take that very seriously, and that is at the core of what we do, and making sure that data is working for the farmer. But we also do that to help farmers address the Illinois nutrient loss reduction goals. Again, this program was started by the Illinois Corn Growers Association, all with the goal of trying to help farmers address those nutrient loss goals related to agriculture and help meet the benchmarks in 2025 and 2035 related to those goals. To kind of give you a scope and scale of our current program, we're at about 520 farmers participating, collecting data, like I said, at that field scale on about 515,000 acres. Not only in Illinois, we also operate in Nebraska and Kentucky. Our current footprint is that we're in about 35 counties in Illinois, working one-on-one with farmers through 8 different field staff, and we have 2 in Nebraska that are servicing about 12 counties out there, and then 1 currently in Kentucky, servicing about 10 counties in 3 different watersheds. And we're also looking to expand. So we hope to have some news to share about that in the not too distant future, but I will kind of leave it there for now. One thing I'll also mention is partnerships. PCM currently has about 30 different partners that contribute to our efforts in different ways, some through financial contribution to the program, others in sort of an in-kind fashion related to providing support for our federal grants. PCM could not exist without those partnerships. Those are absolutely crucial and vital. We'll talk about this, I think, later on as well, but anybody that's out there that's listening that does represent an organization focused on conservation, please reach out to us. I'd love to explore how we might be able to partner with you. And again, various ways that can happen. So please, I'll put a plug in for that now, but we'll maybe touch on that in a later part as well. Also want to talk just briefly about how we kind of reach farmers who don't work with us directly. So, even though we're growing and gaining a bigger footprint, we're just touching a fraction of the farmers that are not only in the state of Illinois, but more broadly across the Midwest. But the way we work is we try to collect data and present it in a fashion that does have something to benefit every farmer, all those that we don't work with. So we put out an annual publication called the Business Case for Conservation. Put a little plug in for that. What we do is use that to break down sort of the top 25% most profitable farms in our program and examine what sort of management practices those farmers are utilizing, and show that sort of distribution of that breakdown in this document, and then also comment on the environmental impacts associated with the conservation those farmers are using, things like that, and demonstrate, again, through different management approaches, what the average soil loss or nutrient loss is associated with those different management styles, as well as the carbon footprint associated with that. We also break it down by commodity, both corn and soy currently, and potentially others in the future. But we communicate out the results from this in a variety of ways. So folks like Lou work one-on-one with farmers, communicate that data back to them in an annual report called our Resource Analysis and Assessment Plan. We communicate it out through this business case document that also gets released in Prairie Farmer Magazine for those who live in Illinois. That reaches about 30,000 folks. And then we also communicate it through webinars, such as what we're doing today. Again, we're going to keep this more conversational. So if you do have any questions, please present those in the app, and we will address those later. And then we also try to reach farmers through peer-to-peer networking events, through field days and other similar types of events where we, really kind of try to bring in those folks that are maybe have adopted certain conservation efforts or who are more conventional, and create that dialogue where folks can learn from other folks that are, doing what they're doing from the farmers directly. And we find that to be very valuable. One thing we also want to mention today is just the farmer advocacy side of what we do. So I mentioned that we were sort of started by the Illinois Corn Growers Association and have been championed also by the Illinois Soybean Association and the commodity groups in other states. Very much a farmer advocacy side to what we do, and the need for folks to not just view us as simply a conservation program, or that farmers have to be already doing conservation to join our program and participate as a cooperator. We very much are interested in folks that are taking a more conventional approach, working with us, sharing those results, and helping us add to the data set that we can utilize then to demonstrate what gaps there may be from a revenue standpoint related to conventional approaches versus conservation approaches. And we can sort of take that back and use that to communicate to the USDA, federal organizations, or others that may be interested in farmers adopting conservation for all the right reasons, but we have to help make sure farmers overcome maybe some of the financial gap that can sometimes create. And so really important that we do also get a really good snapshot of the conventional approaches farmers are utilizing, and help everyone else understand why they may still be doing that. If they're making multiple tillage passes or have not yet adopted cover crops, there may be very sound economic reasons why they haven't done that, or why they're doing that at a slower pace than people would like to see. So we can utilize all of that to help advocate on behalf of farmers in that conversation. With that, I think I will cut it off there. And again, happy to answer questions later. And I think we're going to have a good dialogue, but I will then hand it over to Dr. Gary Schnitkey again, and he will tell you break down some of the data for us from PCM.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I'm going to break down some of the data that we see here. I would point you to the handouts in the webinar. So if you go there, you can see some of the slides, if you will, that I'm going to be speaking from that illustrate some of the points that I'm going to be talking about. We have been at this since 2016. Am I right there? 2016.
Officially 2015, but yeah, probably the first year there was data to demonstrate would have been 2016.
So we're coming up on a very long, or relatively long, set of data, particularly for East Central Illinois. And that has been very useful. And for looking at both the economics of practices on farms, as well as looking at some of the environmental consequences. We typically look at the results from PCM as far as three things: tillage, cover crops, and nitrogen benchmarks. On tillage, what we have seen from our data is that the most intense systems are not the most profitable. When we begin looking at 2+ pass systems and 2 pass systems that have some sort of heavy tillage in them, we don't see the profitability of those as being as large as some of the less intense systems. So this data illustrates that those intense systems are less profitable, and those more intense systems also have more probability of having soil erosion and sequester less carbon. We are the 1-pass systems and the 2-pass light systems typically have the highest profitability. And what we're now working on is looking at the no-till systems, which have about the same profitability as 1-pass systems, and strip till systems, and looking at ways of making those more profitable. So that's tillage results. We see less intense systems as being more profitable. On cover crops, by doing some interviews with our most profitable cover crop farms, we've identified sort of a standard system for cover crops going from corn to soybeans. And other studies also verify this as well, but typically going from corn to soybeans, the cover crop species of choice is cereal rye. Cereal rye typically has a lower cost than some of the other species, and it also has the property of overwintering pretty easily. So we apply that we plant it after corn. And the method, we see all different types of methods, but broadcasting that seed with fertilizer is one that has become more and more used, and actually typically gets a pretty good emergence, and also has the advantage of being less costly than drilling, and faster than drilling. And then the key to this system is to plant soybeans early. April, if you can, in East Central Illinois. Planting soybeans earlier have a profit advantage, and so if we can do that with cover crop systems, that works well. Terminating the cover crop can then occur on either side of that planting, and we see farmers do both. We have less of a standard system from soybeans going into corn. It would appear, and there's a lot of work going on here, and that is one of the things that we're really going to be focusing on. But that system is more difficult, and getting the cover crops so that you don't have yield disadvantages with the corn that follows it is more of an issue than with corn going into soybeans. In our nitrogen work, the big factor that we find that influences profitability is keeping nitrogen applications rate in that close to the MRTN, which is sort of in the 175-ish area for most of Central Illinois. It varies a little bit by year and by area, but let's just take 175 pounds of actual N per acre. We see a lot of farms apply above that, and we don't see a profit advantage for applying above that. So if we move those rates down to that MRTN range, we see increased profitability, and that also has some environmental benefits. There's less chance of nitrogen runoff, and actually, if you look at the intensity of use of fuel, and also the ability to sequester carbon, it increases with the lower rate. We also look at different systems that exist out there for applying nitrogen, and we divide those out as primarily fall systems, and then primarily spring, primarily side dress, and then we look at splitting nitrogen in 50-50 and three-way splits. Actually, we find that one pass sort of nitrogen systems are more profitable than the splitting nitrogen, and that occurs for two reasons. One is that every time you apply nitrogen, you incur a cost. And the second thing, for whatever reason, those farms in our data set that apply nitrogen on 2+ pass systems and 3 pass systems tend to apply nitrogen at higher levels. When we look at the profitability in our data set, we find that the higher profitability is either in that pre-plant or mostly side dress area. Both of those have pretty good profitability, and those profitability is actually higher than the fall applied nitrogen. Fall applied nitrogen has one issue, actually several issues. One is that we also see fall applied systems as putting on more nitrogen than the MRTN. If you want to make the fall system more profitable, put less nitrogen on, and then that brings that system's profitability back closer to the mostly pre-plant and mostly side dress. The other issue that's going on is we're usually using a nitrogen inhibitor with fall applied, which is $13 to $15 per acre, and that is a cost that sort of offsets the advantage of putting anhydrous ammonia on, which typically has lower price than per pound of N than nitrogen solutions. So again, what our data is suggesting is that those mostly pre-plant or mostly side dressed are actually a bit more profitable, particularly if we get those MRTN, those rates closer to MRTN. And in our data set, we still see that a lot of farmers apply well above the MRTNs, and 70%, I think, is the number that we see in our data set. So and again, we're going to continue to look at this data, but just from the nitrogen standpoint, getting close to the MRTN, doing a one-pass system, mostly pre-plant, mostly side dress. Again, keeping the rates near those MRTNs are critical in keeping our nitrogen cost and profitability in line. Over the next several months or so, we're going to, again, continue to look at the soybean, the corn, the cover crop system. We're really taking a look at strip till and seeing how we make that system more profitable. And we're also going to divide these systems. We so far have looked at it from a corn standpoint and a soybean standpoint. We're going to begin looking at those as more of a system. For example, one system would be no-till soybean, strip top corn, and sort of looking at those as a more systems approach. Mm-hmm. So that's my story, and I'll stick to it for a while, and we'll turn her over to Lou and have him talk about the field staff perspective and soil carbon markets, excuse me, and go from there. And by the way, one other thing, if you got questions or things that you want us to comment on, let us put them in the chat box so we can look those things over, and we'll answer them as we go. Go ahead, Lou.
Very good. Thanks, Gary and Greg. Yeah, please invite some questions. Absolutely. My name is Lou Liva. I am the Precision Conservation Specialist in the Northwest region. So I work in Rock Island County, Henry County, Mercer, Knox, and a lot of other counties that kind of surround those. And there are field level staff like me all throughout Illinois. And so our program depends on having quality data that then we can assess and provide these outcomes. And so when a farmer joins PCM, they meet with a specialist like myself. I'll come out to their farm, I'll come out to their home, and I'll sit there at the kitchen table with them, and we'll go through their farm operation. A little bit of time on the computer, but then the computer gets put away. Here's a pen and paper, and we're just talking about what you're doing. So joining the program is free to join. Because we are entirely check-off funded, we are here to help you maximize your profitability and compare your farms to other farms in the region or even in your county. We have county level data sets. So the commitment of the farmer in joining PCM is to meet with a specialist like myself 4 times a year. And that may be in-person meetings or virtually or through email. So the first meeting is our enrollment meeting. That's where I come out and we learn about your operation, take notes about every pass that you take through the field, fertility rates, active ingredients in your herbicide, things like that. The second meeting is just a quick phone call or a short meeting where we talk about before harvest, what your plans are the next year. The third meeting is our harvest data collection. That's really quick, often a phone call. We gather things like yields and drying data. And then the fourth meeting is when we provide the product to our farmers, the resource analysis and assessment plan, what we call the RAP. And Greg had shared a little bit about what that is at the head of the meeting, but we provide benchmarking and comparisons of your farm against our aggregated data set, whether that's the county or the region. So that's the number one deliverable that we provide to our farmers. But it's also my job as a specialist to help farmers maximize cost share opportunities, whether that is through a practice change or through practices that they are already implementing. So I'd like to tell you folks a little bit about the different cost share opportunities out there. One way that we conceptualize cost share here in PCM is thinking of 2 buckets. One bucket is the federal cost share programs that can be filled by traditional programs through the NRCS, such as the Environmental Qualities Incentives Program or Conservation Stewardship Program, also known as EQIP or CSP. But also there's a lot of new programs coming out through the Climate Smart Commodities Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, whereas EQIP and these traditional programs, they provide very competitive rates, but they're also very competitive to get into and come with a lot of requirements. These new federal programs, program called Farmers for Soil Health, will not pay as much, but it's a lot easier to get into. You would self-enroll on your computer. This program pays $50 for new cover crop adopters over 3 years. So you want to fill that federal bucket with something if you can. And then you've got the private bucket, the carbon bucket. And so pulling one from each of these buckets, you can maximize the cost share revenues that are available. So within carbon markets, there's a couple different ways that carbon is conceptualized and paid. So you may hear carbon credits. This is kind of the first way that carbon has been sold or generated. These are where your farm practices will then generate a credit that can be bought and sold in a marketplace. This typically comes with more requirements, and these are typically bought by organizations that don't have any association with agriculture. We call that carbon offsetting. So then there's carbon insetting, and that's a way a lot of these programs are going in. An example of carbon insetting is our Pepsi program, where Pepsi looks into their supply shed, knows that these corn and soy products are going into their product, ultimately wanting to reduce their carbon impacts, and so they will pay farmers for specific practices. The third one, which I'll touch on quickly, is the CI score or carbon intensity score. This is where your farm will have a score, a whole farm average score associated with your practices, where the idea is that then you can get a premium per bushel on your grain at the elevator. Now, the CI score is something that's coming down the pipeline. It's not something that I know any farmers who've been paid for. These are funded through a 45Z tax credit through the federal government payment, which are paying ethanol plants to reduce their carbon. The big question here is what piece of that are growers going to get? So keep your eye on the CI scores moving forward. But right now, we're mostly going to be looking at carbon inset markets. So when talking about these carbon markets, there's so many of them. And new ones are coming out every month, and they're always changing. And so when I'm working with farmers, I like to share some questions that they can ask and some ways that they can frame and decide which program is going to be their best fit. So we're going to go through a couple of these things. First question to ask when you're working with a representative from one of these carbon markets is to ask, does this program pay for new practices? And does it pay for existing practices? A lot of these carbon markets are looking for additionality, which means they're looking for you to make a change on your farm, adopting reduced tillage or adopting cover crops. But there are other programs, such as our Pepsi one, which will pay for existing practices. The Pepsi program that we work with pays $5 an acre for no-till, no matter how long you've been no-tilling. So look for those that have the existing practices if that's something that you're already doing on your farm. The second one, folks, this is a rapidly changing landscape, right? So you're going to be wanting to be looking at the contract length. Some of these programs are asking for multi-year commitments. I would recommend staying away from those programs. Year-to-year programs are your best bet. You have a 1-year commitment, and should those payments go up, well, then you're well suited for enrolling that next year. The third one here is, what is the burden on your time as a farmer? With PCM, we take the data that we work with and we use that to generate carbon assets on behalf of our farmers. But a lot of these programs are going to be asking you to go on the computer, enter this information yourself, and then there's often a verification process. So some of these programs may be asking you to go out to your field and take pictures and upload those online during certain times of year. So there's great revenue to be gained from these programs, but you need to be asking, how much time do you need to put into it? And how does that make the value of the program change for you? All right, 2 more here. What's the payment structure? Does it pay by carbon? So some of these programs will pay by practice. And they'll say, hey, if you go to no-till, we'll pay you $10 an acre. We believe that that's the best way for these prices to be structured because they are the most transparent for the farmer. But if another way that these payments are structured is through by carbon metric ton. So they would find what practice changes you're willing to do. They would run it through a model, and you wouldn't know what your payments are until you've worked with the specialist or a salesperson and they've determined what the model says your payment should be. So a lot less clear, not as good for the farmer. And then I guess I got 2 more now. Another one here, folks, is that a lot of these programs are now being partially federally subsidized. So you should be asking, what is the funding source of these carbon markets? We were talking about those 2 buckets at the head of my talk here, the federal payments and the private payments. Some of these carbon markets pull from both buckets. So understanding what that funding source is will help you understand what is the best option for you. And then I'll kind of leave it off here, folks. Your data is incredibly valuable. It is becoming more and more valuable every year. And the way that we collect data and data is shared is setting a precedent for years to come. And so if you're working with one of these carbon market programs and you're providing your information, ask that question. Where's my data going? Is it being sold to anyone? Is anyone going to get a look at it? Your data privacy is important for multiple reasons. And just providing your data to anyone leaves you missing out on an opportunity because your data is valuable and your data is powerful. And I'll close here, folks, and just saying, even if you're not doing carbon market programs now, get your data in order because it's going to continue to be more and more important moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. And again, if you have any questions or that you would like the panel to address, please drop them in the chat box. And I'll start with the question that you sort of ended with, Lou. When you say get your data in order, what does that mean? And Greg, and you, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, I think that there's not a standardized way for data to be collected by these organizations. So having a way that makes sense to you is a good way to do it. So that means understanding what your fertility is by field, understanding when these passes are taking place, and then ultimately your production by field. And if you have, once you start getting this data in order, it can not only assist you in signing up for these programs, but also assist you with management decisions. And this resource assessment analysis plan that we bring to our farmers, these RAP plans, that's really what we're doing for our farmers, is that we are gathering all their data and putting it in one binder. And farmers that have been in PCM for a long time, they can flip through these binders and they'll have not only these profitability charts, but also by field, we keep a track of what your fertility was on that field, ultimately your overall costs, how that impacted your profitability and your yield. And then we can start looking at trends and identify fields where they may not be performing as well. And that's where us as specialists have been trained to recommend these practice changes. So yeah, either find a way to get your data together in a way that makes sense for you, or look towards an organization like PCM that can do that for you.
Greg, you have anything you want to add on that, or?
I think Lou summarized it perfectly. I think exactly what he said. There's not a tremendous amount of consistency today as far as what different programs are recommending. There's not necessarily even consistency across the different models that are being utilized to generate carbon assets or other environmental assets that may be being monetized on the farmer's behalf. And so in general, I would echo exactly what Lou said. I think do it in a way that makes sense to you. Ultimately, I think a lot of the programs are working on a field by field basis. So coming up with average fertility information by field, being able to demonstrate what your yield was by field, the timing of those different passes by field, I think that's all going to be critically important. I think it's always better to err on the side too of more data than less, and it can always be aggregated, in a less intensive fashion later. But to start with a more highly granular information set is probably best. And important to know, we will try to work with you no matter what format your data is in, whether it's paper records from a shoebox or your My John Deere or your climate account. We can kind of help work with you, and no matter what format that's in. Certain programs I know are trying to develop relationships to make that sort of data transfer easier. I think there's always going to be a benefit to the human side of that interaction and ensuring the data quality. I would just echo why we believe that sort of one-on-one relationship and through the conservation specialist and the farmer is critically important. And other programs kind of approach that a little bit differently. But yeah, I'd say those are my kind of additional thoughts there, but I thought Lou summarized it all really well.
So we got a couple questions here. Let's start with Lou. So how it's about the data, how you collect it and what you do with it and the confidentiality of it. So how do you collect it and what you do with it? And then we'll turn to Greg and then I'll talk about what I do with it. But go ahead.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, appreciate the question. So we collect it, as we were saying, through one-on-one meetings. And the way that we conceptualize this data is that we go pass by pass. So it's all self-reported data. So there's not necessarily a verification process, but I would go sit down with a farmer, a specialist like myself, and I just say, okay, you just harvested the corn. You're about to plant soybean. What's the first thing you're doing in the fall? And we go sequentially. You're spreading dry. What are your products? What are your rates? Was it custom done? Okay, very good. Moving to the next pass. And then just one by one, we gather different information about the pass, and then we attribute that to specific fields and crops by year. Does that feel like a sufficient answer? Anyone want to provide any guidance?
Well, there is a question. Will you ever share your results with other clients or other farmers?
Absolutely not. Actually, like it's kind of funny. We have a very strict data privacy agreement, and of course, farmers love to talk. But I don't even use a farmer's name that they're in the program. So sometimes I'll get these questions. Oh, is neighbor Joe in the program? And I just have to skirt around that question. So absolutely not. We do not talk about what other farmers are doing. We do not talk about who they are. The aggregated and anonymized data set only gets published after we cross certain thresholds of acres as well as participants. So no one can then infer, oh yeah, I know the one guy doing cover crops in this part of the county, and so I can kind of guess who he is. So yep, no gossiping, no talking about you, and absolutely no sharing of your data outside of an aggregated and anonymized way.
No, Lou's exactly right. Yeah, we do not sell farmer data. The data, again, is meant to be working for the farmer, on behalf of the farmer. You are the only one that will ever see your individual farm data that is shared with the program. And yeah, we have what we call our farmer portal. As soon as data is sort of entered into the farmer portal, for those who work with the aggregated anonymized data, again, it is anonymized. It's actually scrubbed of any personal identification information before it goes into that status. So for instance, Gary helps break down the information related to the overall practices, the profitability of different practices, and all the data that he demonstrated that on today is scrubbed of any personal information before he sees it and starts going through that analysis. Same for the partners that we work with on the corporate side. So Lou mentioned a lot about our PepsiCo program, the program we work on with them, sort of incenting farmers for practice changes in their supply sheds. It's exactly the same way. The way that the information is shared back to them is on a supply shed basis, based on large aggregated data. No individual farmer information is ever shared back with them, and they like it that way. Part of the reason they like to work with us and other programs similar to us is, ensuring that the trust component is there, and they were very happy about how we handle that information. Farmers tend to be very happy with how we handle that information, and it's pretty different than how a lot of other organizations and companies are handling it. Another question I see up here, and I'll use this opportunity to address it, is PCM a for-profit company? No, we are a nonprofit organization, program affiliated again with the Illinois Corn Growers Association, which is also a nonprofit funded through the corn checkoff. Our intention is absolutely not to try to gain a profit through this. It is, in fact, we actually encourage and pay farmers to join our program, participate in the benchmarking aspect of what we do. Again, beyond just the value that we're trying to provide the farmers directly that do participate with us, we have built into our mission is the idea that we can utilize that information to help move all farmers along in the state and the other states that we work in by having valuable data that's meaningful to them and having a widespread effort that's, looking at different soil types, looking at different ecoregions, so to speak, that experience different weather, and that we can use that to provide information that's valuable to every farmer. And so, no, we are absolutely not for profit. And I'll kind of leave it there. Let's see. Looks like we've got another.
Yeah, I'm just going to mention that on the data question, you can see the summaries here. So actually this is most of the data that goes into here is summarized by Laura Gentry, and that goes into here. I have access to the anonymized data, so I can't. When I look at the data, I don't know any of the operation names, etc. When we summarize it here, there has to be a certain number of fields within it before we summarize it, and so the intent of this is to keep it so that you can never identify a farmer or a field in specific. I would also say that this is being run by farmer-oriented systems, Illinois Corn, Illinois Soybean Association, etc. Our intent is to, in cooperation with the University of Illinois, in some cases, is to provide farmers with value and not other people. So we're attempting to look at for profitable operations or profitable practices, and if we see some that have some environmental consequences and aren't profitable, we're going to say so. So that's where we're at. And there's another question here for Greg and Lou. How many private partnerships does PCM have?
Yeah, excellent question. On the order of half a dozen. We to date have primarily worked again with PepsiCo, but those who know who PepsiCo is, which is pretty much everybody, they have a lot of supply chain partners that they work with, such as ADM, Cargill, Bunge, many other sort of intermediate grain originators that may be doing some sort of intermediate processing step that's ultimately leads to a product that ends up in a PepsiCo product. So we've worked with some of those intermediate programs throughout time to form relationships and help in different places in the supply chain, and have some others in the works. I will refrain from mentioning any of the others at present, but we're looking at, again, what Lou talked about earlier, as far as when we think about what it's going to take to sort of help the row crop ag industry and help farmers facilitate these transitions by bringing financial resources to the table for it. I think we see that it's going to take everybody. The federal government has, in the last few years here, invested unprecedented levels of funding into this space. But one of the main things they're looking for is where's private industry with coming alongside that with match in order to leverage all aspects of the supply chain, in addition to federal dollars to facilitate this change. And I think when you start to add up, the information that Gary breaks down for us every year and look at the gaps that sometimes there between maybe a conventional system and a conservation system with maybe a bit less environmental impact, you add up that gap, multiply it by the number of acres out there we're trying to influence this change on, and add up the years, and you get to a very large number very, very quickly. And so I think we can all probably appreciate that and think there's no one funding source that's likely to facilitate that entire change. And so again, this takes lots of partnerships. It takes working with groups that farmers trust. It takes designing programs that don't violate that trust and keep farmers at the heart of what they're doing. And we feel pretty good about the approach that we take, and it's been pretty well received. So again, would encourage both farmers to look into us that maybe aren't working with us today, as well as other, companies or entities that have a similar mission to us, and let's talk about what that looks like to partner together. I'll leave it there, but I see another question up here from the audience. Are we working with any organic operations? Yes, we do. We do have systems designed around organic. Off the top of my head, I don't know if Lou is working with any organic operations in his region. But yes, as we work with more producers and have more information related to different types of farming and different systems, we will be able to share more around that in time, but it does take time. And again, we try to keep it anonymous and not violate confidentiality. And so we have pretty strict rules of how many farms and how much area has to be participating before we aggregate and communicate out that information. Anything to add there, Lou?
No, I only work with a couple folks who are transitioning to organic, but yeah, I agree with everything you said and appreciate you pointing out that facet that we need to collect more information and cross those thresholds to maintain farmer privacy before we publish any aggregates on those kinds of systems.
So Lou, do PCM specialists make fertilizer pesticide recommendations? And if you do, what are they based on?
Very good. Yeah. So particularly around nitrogen, as we were kind of looking at the way our data was structured, we do make nitrogen recommendations, applying closer to that MRTN. From a conservation outcome, we like to see more of the nitrogen moving in season. So it's been good to see that the economics do follow that. The way that I'm trained to make a recommendation is to, as I was saying earlier, identify a field that has not been performing. And anytime we're making a practice change, start small, give it a try, see what happens, and then scale up. But our data set shows a very convincing case for applying to that MRTN rate. And that is part of the nitrogen recommendations that we make. As for pesticides, that's not necessarily the focus of our program. We don't gather data in as much specificity as we do with nitrogen. So generally, I'm not making many pesticide recommendations, though we have seen that advanced cover croppers and experienced cover croppers have been able to reduce their herbicide rates to increase profitability.
So we got a question here. How often does PCM update their costs for things like seed cost and fertilizer cost and equipment cost? Those are updated yearly. So if the way the process works here, and Lou might and Greg might chime in here as well, they collect, or PCM collects the amount of, for example, nitrogen applied, and it would be in the form it's applied. We apply to that when we do the economic cost, standard cost, anhydrous ammonia cost across the system. We update those costs once per year, so we'll actually begin doing that, well, in a couple months for the 2024 production. So we'll be providing a list of standard costs, so once a year.
Yeah, I would add on to that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to step on your toe.
No, go ahead, Lou. I didn't.
We use that fixed cost data because that helps us compare apples to apples. If you ended up getting anhydrous ammonia for a different price than what we have as an average, that's something you can keep in mind in assessing your own systems. But this allows us to have a consistent data set using that fixed cost data provided by Gary there.
Yeah. We also have a question. Have we had experience with nitrogen replacements, and those being on the markets. We collect those, right? But we haven't really. Have you done an analysis, Lou, in your own area of some of the nitrogen replacements? We haven't done one at a total level yet.
Yeah,
No, go ahead, Lou.
Greg.
Okay.
In terms of what we track, we haven't gotten too deep on the nitrogen replacements. Anecdotally, I am working with farmers who use them, but yeah, maybe you could provide a higher level kind of look at that, Greg.
Yeah, I'll try to give a snapshot of it. Yeah, we have yet to start breaking down like the financial analysis associated exactly with specific products, but are beginning to track. Are you using, say, a biological product? One of the most well known is Pivot Bio. We're starting to track that, and that would sort of show up in our data analysis based on the way we are collecting information around fertility in general, overall nitrogen rates, and then obviously the yields are reported as well. So we'll sort of inherently have information around that, but we've yet to sort of break that down where we're doing a 1 or a 0, so to speak, related to did you or did you not use a biological? Did that replace how many pounds of nitrogen, traditional nitrogen fertilizer did that replace? We've yet to sort of break data down like that, but something, again, as these become more prominently used, I think we will start to look into as that becomes a more increasingly important question overall and meaningful to farmers.
We have a question that I don't think we know the answer of. I don't know the answer of. Do you know? So we have a September 5th Zoom meeting here on. Does that overlap with ISA and PCM meeting at Richland Community College?
Yeah, I think these are separate meetings. So yeah, you may be in a situation of picking one or the other. The benefit, I will say, of the September 5th Zoom here is that those are always recorded. So those will be recorded and put on Farm Doc's YouTube page. So you'd have the opportunity to go back. So definitely take advantage of that if you'd like to. Go to the ISA field day at Richland Community College and see that firsthand.
I don't know. So we have one more question. How do you overcome the desire for farmers? How do you overcome the desire that biologicals are to increase yield rather than replace nitrogen? So,
boy, that's a good question. I'm honestly not entirely sure I understand the question exactly, but I think, it's one of those things. Again, I think we can help start to answer this question for farmers related to the economics of those biologicals. What are you paying for it? What is it? How much synthetic nitrogen is it being advertised to replace? And are you, sort of conducting that experiment for yourself on a, part of your acres versus the entirety of your corn crop? And then, what was the yield and profitability related to that? I think, if the person that entered that question wants to expand on it, happy to try to address it differently. But
I would just say if you're over the MRTN, let's say you're putting on 240 pounds of N, and you don't change the N rate and you put a biological on, you're probably not following the premise of the biological as a replacement, and you're adding cost and maybe not getting the benefit.
Yeah.
So
I would expand on that a little too, Gary. I've had several conversations with farmers about these different products. And one thing I think you do want to tease out if you are experimenting with biologicals is if you are lowering your nitrogen rate, maybe do a check strip where you lower your rate and also do not use the biological. And if you can sort of parse out the returns on that, make sure that the, say, profitability increase you saw on that area you did apply the biological, how that compares to the strip or field where you lowered your rate but did not apply the biological. So, is the profit increase you're seeing simply because you're maximizing profitability with, like, say, an MRTN related rate versus are you truly getting an end bump from the biological product? I'd say that's a decent way to compare.
So we're coming to the end of our webinar, and we'll just end here. Greg, and then Lou, and then I'll close up. Greg, final thoughts.
Sure. So, first and foremost, I think, again, we're trying to work with a complete cross-section of farmers, whether you are currently doing conservation practices or not. So, again, we actually compensate farmers just to sign up for our program. No reason in our minds, at least, other than the time it'll take you to participate with us to join. There, the benchmarking aspects of what we do are available to anybody that currently farms in the regions we're a part of, or that we offer PCM in. And same on the partnership side. Please do reach out to us and check us out, and let's talk about what a partnership might look like. We are definitely taking our mission of trying to help farmers address environmental concerns very seriously, and so we want to understand what all opportunities there are to work with different partners, and just help move farmers in this general direction.
Lou?
Yeah, just to echo what Greg was saying here, our program is free to join. You get $500 for joining in that first year, $250 for being in your second year, and there's no practice change requirements to join our program. So we may have conservation in our name, but we believe we can provide a farmer value regardless of their in-field practices. Another piece of our organization is that we are advocates on behalf of farmers. And part of that, and part of assessing these in-field conservation practices, comes down to us having a well-rounded data set. So conservation is in our name, but like I said, any kind of corn and soy farmer, I believe, could find value in our organization. And one thing that I've really loved about our organization and the information that we publish through Gary is that even if conservation isn't the most economical outcome, we publish that. And part of us being advocates is that Greg's at the table with organizations, sharing what these gaps are in profitability. Should regulation come down the line here around nutrient loss, PCM is equipped to be an advocate on behalf of farmers.
Thanks, Lou. And I'll just close here. I would reiterate what Lou said. I think if you're a farmer and you want to begin that data collection and thinking about soil carbon markets, there's a benefit for joining PCM and getting that started. And if any other organizations, like Greg said, are interested, let's do it. And just to reiterate, one of the things that we continually find is that nitrogen rates are most profitable near the MRTN, which is roughly 180 pounds of N. And if you want to know a more precise number, join PCM and we'll provide it to you. So with that, I want to thank our sponsors. So our sponsors here at FarmDoc make all of these things possible. Illinois Corn, Illinois Soybean Association, the Center for Farmland Assessment, TIA, CREF, and Farm Credit, Compier, and I think I have them all. Don't I, Jim? Or did I manage to miss somebody there? If I apologize. We appreciate it. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.